Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting us. I'm Gail Nyhan, and this is an interesting topic. I think you may be aware of it coming up nationally as well as locally, and I hope today that we'll be able to increase your information about the topic and see if you are interested in participating in the local campaign. So we have some slides here, and then there'll be time for some discussion, and Meghan will cover the second half of the slides. So what is the Raise the Wage Coalition? Well, we're a growing coalition of faith, labor, community, and nonprofit organizations. Now, they're listed here. I'll mention a few. The Campus Alliance for Economic Justice at San Jose State, the Mountain View Day Worker Center, the Multi-Faith Voices for Peace and Justice, Our Walmart, which is a national worker organization, the Peninsula Peace and Justice Center, which was mentioned, I think you're quite familiar with, the Peninsula Young Democrats, Politically Inspired Action, which is our local group in Mountain View, Santa Clara Green Party, labor organization SEIU Unit 521, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the Working Partnerships USA, which is centered in San Jose. Today, what we'd like to do is give you some information about minimum wage data and research. What are the successes so far locally? Current status of the campaign across our region, and how can we move forward together, working regionally and acting locally. One of the main discrepancies that we see when we think about the minimum wage is that it was established in 1938 in our country, and it hasn't been raised nationally in a number of years. And if worker productivity increases had determined increases in the minimum wage, we would already be at $21.72 an hour, and that was determined in 2012. So there's a major problem there with the fact that it hasn't kept up with productivity increases. And of course, in Santa Clara County, we can only imagine what it would be if it had kept pace with the cost of living, which includes housing, the cost of transportation, all kinds of health expenses that everyone has to deal with. So we're going to go into some of the details here. First of all, when you think about a minimum wage worker, who do you think of? Now, I myself have, over the last 2 years that I've been involved with this campaign, have been surprised to learn that it isn't just our fast food workers. It may be the clerk at Macy's who waits on you. It may be the clerk at Home Depot. It may be the home care person, a child care worker, all kinds of people that are earning $9 an hour, which is the California state minimum wage right now. So let's think about the average age. You may have thought of a teenager. Maybe you yourself worked as a teenager at the minimum wage. Actually, the average age of minimum wage workers is 35, and 88% of them are at least 20 years old. Many of them are, over half are women, and many of them are parents. So it's having an impact on our entire society that so many people are working at the bare minimum. Who are the low-wage employers? A lot of them are large companies. 2/3 of them have 100 employees or more. Okay, what about small businesses? Because that always comes up. This on a US basis, 3 out of 5 small business owners do support increasing the minimum wage. Now, the minimum wage nationally at this point is $7.25, which may be surprising to you. That's surprising to me. The president has asked for the Congress to increase this, and so far the Congress has not done that. A number of states have done so, and California is one of them. We are now at $9, and we will be at $10 an hour as of January 2016. We're going to get into the local picture more later. So a lot of small business owners do support that, and 85% of them already pay their employees more than the bare minimum wage. You may wonder, well, do the businesses who have low-wage workers, are they profitable? Yes. 92% of them were profitable among the 50 largest employers in 2012, and 78% were profitable in the previous 3 years. And you may say, well, what about the recession? Well, almost 2/3 of those businesses are earning higher profits now than before the recession. So profits are really not what's holding them back. The other thing is, what percentage of our workers are at this minimum wage? And this graph, which you may not be able to see very well, but it goes from the beginning of the 21 up to 2012, and you can see that the number of lower wage workers is the highest on the graph. The number of middle wage workers has gone down significantly, and higher wage workers are up there almost in numbers close to the number of lower wage workers. And living in Silicon Valley, you may be well aware of that. We have a lot of higher wage workers here, as well as a lot of minimum wage workers. So we have this great income inequality. Okay, what happens to the number of jobs as lower wage workers get a raise? Because there's always a hue and cry that, oh, jobs will go away. The economy will suffer if we raise the minimum wage. Well, San Jose is the case in point, and I understand some of you are from San Jose because you're moving your headquarters down there. So you may be aware of the fact that in November 2012, San Jose passed an increase in the minimum wage to $10.30 an hour. That was a big change, because at that point the state minimum wage in California was $8 an hour. What has happened in the economy of San Jose? They are actually doing fine. There's an improvement in the local economy in San Jose since they raised the minimum wage. So they become kind of a case study in what happens. Also, this chart at the bottom compares states that raised the minimum wage versus states that didn't. And actually, the states that raised the minimum wage had somewhat of a higher increase in employment. So there isn't much difference. So I think we have charged ahead to where Meghan is going to take over.
I also want to just say for a minute that it's exciting to be here with this group. I've come over the years a few times. I know you've covered ballot initiatives, and I really respect all of the work that you're up to. I think that the minimum wage cause is really aligned with the values and mission, and you all will have to tell me more. But when we first in Mountain View, in the Politically Inspired Action Group, started getting involved with this issue, we really were thinking to ourselves, okay, we see poverty, we see suffering here in Mountain View, and our group is really devoted to compassion and kind of fairness for all people in our community. And we were thinking, what's one of the issues of today that could start to make a difference, to start to shift things? And we did a lot of research, and we thought about it and discussed it for a lot before we sort of moved into action of the growing economic disparity and the way in which the minimum wage has really not kept pace here, and the realities of people who are trying to live off minimum wage. When I first started doing petitioning outside Walmart, I talked to a lot of people. I've done a lot of petitioning in my life. I've never had this many people stop and be like, oh, of course, I'm going to sign this. It seemed pretty like a very there was a lot of consensus around it. Even nationally, over 50% of Republicans support a raise in the minimum wage. I think about 80% of Democrats. So this isn't quite a bipartisan or a split issue among parties. But so when I was petitioning, there was also an area like, what minimum wage do you support? People were shocked to find out that it was $9 an hour. Some people who were living on $9 an hour and sleeping in their cars were not so shocked to hear it. But people across the board seem to support 15, 17, about 80% of people who signed this petition at the very least supported a raise to $15 an hour. So I also know that data and critical thinking are a part of what you all do here. And so I want to just talk a little bit more about the data locally and build off what Gail started talking about. So speaking in terms of a state, our minimum wage is going up to $10 an hour in January of next year, 2016. There is a Senate bill, Senator Leno brought it, to raise the minimum wage to $13 an hour statewide by 2017, and to then rise with inflation. It passed the Senate. However, if you look into sort of the current state of things, it's not looking promising or like this is going to move forward on a statewide basis. So I think that's important framework to understand why it may be important for us in Silicon Valley and Santa Clara, San Mateo County to think of this in terms of our unique economy and our local community and understand why we need to take action regionally and locally. Okay. So I'm here to talk about the part of thinking regionally and acting locally. And by locally in this context, I mean within cities and by city. So here's what I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Why here, why now? I think most of us in this room know that housing costs are skyrocketing. My own apartment complex is raising everyone's rent $500 a month as soon as their leases expire. And that's just that's just me, but it's, I think, highly representative of what's happening across the area. So as that happens, you have people moving 2 hours away, commuting 2 hours to the area in the morning, who knows, 4 a.m. to get to their minimum wage jobs, and 2 hours at night to get back to their families and children often. So the other reason to think regionally is across the Bay Area, and particularly locally, that call for it is rising. A number of Santa Clara County cities are considering the increase, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Palo Alto in particular, closest by. And finally, the city staff in at least Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale especially Mountain View and Sunnyvale, are talking together to see if there's a way to line up so that we can move together regionally. Why now? Why here? So when I walk down the street in Mountain View, which is where I live, I see booming restaurants, I see a thriving economy. It's quite a fun walk down Castro Street, actually. It doesn't seem to me like when I walk down the street in San Francisco, where there's clearly evident homelessness, people lying on the street, I would say before I really started researching this, yeah, I knew it was a problem, but I really didn't see it as much. But we have absolutely rising economic inequality. More than 800,000 people in the region are living below the poverty line. So while our streets are not filled in the same way as San Francisco, that doesn't mean that parents, I've heard stories of parents, they drop their kids off at school, they pick their kids up, and that night they're all sleeping in the car. You might not know it, their schoolmates might not know it, the other parents might not know it, but it is the reality that a lot of families are facing this situation. And we have, as you can see, maybe here, the top bracket is Santa Clara County, the bottom is the US average. You can see that Santa Clara, compared to San Francisco, Napa, Santa Cruz, and the US, 57.3% of households are making $75,000 and above. That's great. I have no problem with people having abundance, right? That said, we also know 800,000 people in the region and around Santa Clara County are living in poverty. So while we have this growing abundance of wealth and housing and living costs are going up, are the people who are working the jobs that we need, the people we appreciate, our servers, our janitors, are they able to keep up with the times? Are they able to also benefit from this like thriving economy that we have? And it doesn't seem like the answer is yes. So why think about it? The way we've been thinking about it is by city. As Gail was mentioning, Obama did call for a minimum wage across the country. That has also been stalled, similar to California, with the new $13 proposal. So what Obama himself called for, and what the US Conference of Mayors in fact endorsed, was approaching this on a city level. The US Conference of Mayors endorsed higher city minimum wages as the key tool to fight income inequality at the local level. And we can see that as Seattle has raised their minimum wage, and as cities across the country have, that the movement is growing toward addressing this. So, Bay Area. It's been in the news. We are seeing our counterparts in San Francisco, in the East Bay. There's also movement, by the way, up in Sonoma and Napa in Marin counties. We can see that raises are happening. There's popular support for it. Oakland has already moved to $12.25 in January. San Francisco is on their way to $15 by 2018. Emeryville, in fact, is on their way to $16 by July of 2019. So this is happening. We know that Santa Clara County has a even more thriving economy than, like we just saw in the last slide, than any of these areas. So what about us? Do we want to join in here? Santa Clara living wage calculator. We have been waiting for the new data to come out. We've been sitting on the 2012 data for a while, so I'm happy to be able to share with you. Just released. MIT basically calculates across the country for different counties how much it takes to live. What hourly wage do you need to live? And they also look at how much people are actually earning in different professions. So there's a little red arrow. I don't know if people can read that tiny figure, but what it says is the bare minimum, one adult, no kids, no partner, what would be an hourly wage for them to live in this area? $13.81. That is the bare minimum. When you get up to one adult supporting 3 children, you get to $39.50 to be able to live. And that's healthcare, that's housing. A poverty wage would be $5 for a single adult, but for most everyone else, $9 and $10 remains to be very much a poverty wage. Annual expenses, I won't go into all of this data. We can make this accessible if you want to look. You can also look on MIT Living Wage Calculator on Google. But an annual expense, let's take 2 adults and 2 kids, for housing would be $20,000, and they would require an annual income before taxes of $58,860. So what are the typical annual salaries? Well, excitingly, we have a typical annual salary for those in the computer field of $94,000. And education, $52,000. And now when we get to the living wage for just a single adult, remember this is less than most, and that would be $28,000. That's what you need. So this isn't the typical salary, but this is the kind of cutoff of what you would need to live. When we go into what we see as the typical salary for people in Santa Clara County, people in the food prep industry are making about $20,000 on average. Minimum wage workers are making about $18,000. So $28,000 living wage for single adult, minimum wage workers, $18,000. I think we can see a pretty huge discrepancy. And we know that this is a reality that many people are living on a minimum wage or attempting to live on a minimum wage in our area. So what have we seen? What do we hope to see? So as Gail talked about, San Jose did raise their minimum wage. I think, going from $8 to $10 was a pretty big increase, and it has worked out very well. They're now at $10.30 because they were indexed to the cost of living. And Mountain View and Sunnyvale are in process. So they have made a goal, a commitment to raising the minimum wage to $15 by 2018. And this is going to be discussed in Mountain View at the very least by this October to see if we can officially adopt something that will then become part of our city policy, what the hourly wage will be, at what point, how we're going to implement that, and how we can coordinate with other cities if possible. So I'll just tell one short snippet from someone named Cherry Lunario, who was a home care worker in San Jose. In March of 2013, Cherry got a $2 an hour raise. This was not a ticket to high living, clearly, but Lunario, who worked and lived in a home for mentally disabled adults when the increase took effect, says her raise provided about $200 an extra month after taxes. And she was able to afford a cracked filling in a tooth that she'd been postponing for years. So in some ways it's like, well, there can be some, will this really even make a difference? Well, for Cherry, it did. And that $200 extra a month can absolutely make a difference in some people's lives when they're trying to live paycheck to paycheck. So what we would like to see is reaching $15 regionally by 2018. Mountain View, Sunnyvale on the way. Palo Alto is hopefully on their way too. They're a little bit earlier in the process, but want to join us, I think. How do we do this regionally? Well, San Jose crafted a beautiful ordinance. Their ordinance has been successful. We would like to replicate the text so that we can be consistent with our neighbor of San Jose, and adopt our own schedule to $15 regionally. If you're feeling excited and passionate about this, and I hope you are, I know you all are moving headquarters to San Jose, and if in Santa Clara County we can set this precedent, we can get the ball rolling, we can work together regionally, that will also empower San Jose to join us. So hopefully we could see it across the whole region. So Mountain View has drafted a schedule to reach $15 regionally so that we can meet San Francisco, hopefully be San Jose to San Francisco. We can hopefully see everybody converge at $15 an hour by 2018. So we would like to see that schedule adopted. It's going to be on the next slide. So this is just a summary that a clear-cut model is important. San Jose has said I'm not sure, it may be possible that they would enforce it if we craft them differently, but that's a question mark. But San Jose will help our region enforce an ordinance if we craft it similarly. So in terms of the concern that enforcement would raise costs in the area, we have a team that's been doing it, ready and willing to jump in so that we can make this a regional effort. And I would really like to make a plug for the importance of following San Jose's model. It's a clear-cut ordinance. It was well-researched, and it enables us to work and be a regional movement. Okay, so final slide. Mountain View's schedule is right here. We've proposed, the council has proposed, and they are discussing a schedule of, so we just went to $10.30 in July. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we actually have raised the minimum wage to match San Jose. So we're there with San Jose, but we want and believe that we need more. So next July, moving to July of 2017, moving to $13.50, and July 1st of the following year, $18 or $15, that would be 2018. And then every year, similar to San Jose's model, we would adjust with the CPI. So that is the proposed schedule. San Francisco's path is here, so we would be able to converge with them. And as we saw and know, our economy is even more booming than the illustrious and beautiful San Francisco at this point. Our cost of Palo Alto's median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is #1 in the United States of America. #1. San Francisco and New York, right behind us, but #1 is right here. And I actually just learned this a month or so ago. Ken Jacobs and the Berkeley Labor Research Center do a lot of great research if you want to kind of further explore what's the research behind this. And he was saying that the world standard for what you set the minimum wage for tends to be half of the median wage. That's sort of the gold standard worldwide, and that's what you see in many countries worldwide. Our median wage here, I think Palo Alto specifically, is about $45 an hour, which would make, if we're following the standard that many countries around the world, that would make our minimum wage $22 an hour. So if any of you want to convince council to go higher than 15, I'm not going to stand in your way. Perhaps in Nebraska, a $22 minimum wage would not be fitting with their economy. I'm not making claims in any way, but here it seems that from what we know about how economy works and what the worldwide standard is, that our community could absolutely support a minimum wage much higher than what we see today. So I want to thank you all for being here. I have, do we have a specific discussion question that we wanted to propose before moving into question and answer? Okay. Yeah, so this wraps up the talk. There's the thank you for listening. Gail, do you want to join me up here? Okay.
Hi, Dana St. George. Actually, people have gone to the City Council and proposed things like that in the past few months. I did want to say, are you guys from Move On?
So we are both with the Raise the Wage Coalition. So yeah, there's
Move
been...
On. Yeah. They have a terrific series of little clips online, about 2.5 minutes each, one of which is the minimum wage issue by Robert Reich. And it's really excellent. I suggest everyone watch it because it's just so simple and sensible and really makes a great logic, you know. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that 2-minute clip, I've watched it multiple times because it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I was wondering, can the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors implement it county-wide, or does it need to be city-wide?
Do you want to field that one?
We've looked into that, and I think this is on, is it? Yeah. Okay. And they could only affect the unincorporated areas of the county, or they have made some changes in increasing the wage for their contractors for Santa Clara County. So they're actually trying to have a living wage for Santa Clara County contractors, but they each city has to do their own as far as the minimum wage goes.
And they did pass for county workers a living wage? I believe.
So I think
yeah, so there's been really huge
really
success
close?
there that does impact a fair number of workers. And we can see there's some limitations to how much can happen there.
This, I think, is a human rights issue. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's a UN document which was approved by the United States. One of the articles says that people have the right to the basic necessities of life, you know, an appropriate income and so on. So this is one case where the U.S. is in violation of the Declaration of Human Rights. In fact, Jimmy Carter said, I saw him recently, said, out of 30 articles in the Declaration, the U.S. is in violation of 10 of them. Equal pay for equal work, is another one. Anyway, I won't go into, but healthcare anyway. But this is one, and I think I want to make a comment about the U.S. education system. It seems to me that the students, high school students, should know about the Declaration of Human Rights. It's not taught in the school system. So we think we're hot stuff on human rights, or we're not so great on human rights. We shouldn't have a country that is in compliance with the human rights would not have people living on the street.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that comment. Do you happen to be a Mountain View resident?
I'm a Palo Alto resident.
All right, well, we can spread it to Palo Alto. So we'll come right back to minimum wage, although I think this is absolutely on target with economic justice and minimum wage. Mountain View is considering becoming a human rights city right now. I don't know if you've maybe seen that in the paper, which I believe would mean that it becomes a part of the conversation when cities are when they're making their choices and considering things. What we have adopted as a nation, we've signed on, and we are in violation, of some of the things in the Declaration. But if you want to come out to Mountain View and support that, I think that might be one way that we can set a frame where we can actually say, okay, here's why we're doing this minimum wage thing, city.
I might also add, with regard to education, I think the Palo Alto, I think, could include Declaration of Human Rights in its high schools. This is a high school right here. Why isn't the Declaration of Human Rights taught in high school? I don't know whether it is or not. But this is something that could be done at the local level.
Thank you. Great.
I would add, too, that I think that declaration is very interesting as a theoretical framework and as a tool, and I think that we can see concrete examples of workers working at a minimum wage where they just cannot survive in our area, and it's making a big difference. People are moving away. People are being displaced. Families are having to relocate and pull their children out of school. So one way that we hope people will get involved, we have a sign-up sheet on the social action table there. If you're at all interested in either volunteering or even just supporting by email, we could let you know if you list your city of residence when it's coming before your city council, because I understand there are people here from all different cities. Mountain View will be considering further increases in October. We think Palo Alto also. So far, Palo Alto has a subcommittee that's approved recommendation to the Palo Alto City Council for January 2016 of $11 an hour. But the full council has not yet approved that, and we'll consider it in October. So that's an example. We're hoping San Jose is going to take some further steps because they were the leader in our region, and right now we don't know what they're going to do next.
Hi, I didn't get a sense that the different municipalities and cities had specific criteria for raising the minimum wage. Are they following any particular guidelines, or is it what they can get away with? Are they trying to match the MIT living wage numbers? What's the basis for raising the minimum wage?
That's a great question. I think we can probably all see that if we went with the MIT living wage calculator, beyond a single adult, 15 isn't enough. And if we're talking about human rights, and Dave is going to jump in too to help us, yeah? Okay, no question, okay. I believe that it was somewhere around 1481 that is a living wage in Palo Alto specifically for a single adult with no kids. Don't quote me on that. Some of these this is a figure that I approximated myself by compiling lots of data and looking at it. But yeah, I think 15 is certainly sustainable. So if we want to go with data in this region, this is a pretty safe number to go to. We want to go to 30, then we can have another conversation, but 15 is a very safe number to go to. We're seeing it happen around the country. So yeah, that's my answer. Gail, do you want to jump in on that? Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dave Offen. I'm also a member of the Raise the Wage Coalition in Mountain View. And our presenters have shown us how various cities in this region are moving towards $15 an hour, but I wanted to point out that none of them have actually passed ordinances to get us there, other than San Francisco and the East Bay. But I mean, in our immediate area, Palo Alto's talking about it, Mountain View's talking about it, Sunnyvale's talking about it, but they've all just passed kind of resolutions that they'd like to work towards that goal. They really need support from the community, and the only reason that they have gotten as far as they have is because of the support from their communities. So I encourage any of you that care about this issue to show up at the meetings of your city councils to let them know that there is support in the community, because otherwise they may just hear from people who are opposed to it and try to backpedal.
I just want to add on one thing, and then I think Midge had a question as well. Yes. Thank you for saying that. When we first went to council, there was a big group of people, and then when we went to council saying, let's do $15 an hour by 2018, the room was packed, standing room only. People, leaders from all sorts of groups came together and spoke, from mental health agencies to labor to faith. I'm getting chills even just thinking about it, because it made a huge difference. It made a huge difference for Mountain View Council to be able to look out and see the call from the community that this is absolutely something that is both needed, it's what's right, frankly. It's really the right thing to do. And we're there supporting it. And without all of those people that filling the room, no question, we would not be where we are today. No question. So if there's anything that people in this room could do, we all have many causes and we're all very busy. If you put your city down on that sheet of paper, we will email you and tell you when the council meeting is. And if you can show up and bring one person or 5 people, that action alone, if that's the only thing you do on this issue, it makes a huge difference. Everybody in that room, these are small chambers, everybody counts. Yeah, so please come out when your council's talking about it if this is something that you feel moved by. It will really matter. I mean, if everyone in this room came, we'd have half the chamber, the chamber full, so yeah.
I wanted to bring up something that I'm sure a lot of people here are aware of, and that is that one way that that helps people be able to manage on the minimum wage is because we all subsidize people like the Waltons because of earned income credit on the federal level, because of food banks, because of the emergency room, etc. And we need to look at this whole problem concerning those issues, which will still all be services that are needed even if the minimum wage goes up to a big $15 an hour. The other thing to remember that I'm very aware of is that there should be, every city should have at least a just cause for eviction. Many cities are not willing to go for rent control, but they should have just cause for eviction. In my city in East Palo Alto, selling a property is not grounds for making someone move. You have to have just cause for eviction because of something that the tenant is doing that is bad for the whole complex. And I think that's something people need to look at.
Well, I'm getting chills, yeah. Yeah. Taxpayer subsidized. Well, I mean, it's a taxpayer subsidy. Yep.
Hi, I just wanted to add that this is a huge economic issue for our whole country, and it seems like a lot of the focus is on how it would benefit the individual workers. But the real benefit would be that there's a terrible problem right now with wealth being concentrated in the 1% of our society, and that money is kind of out of circulation. Maybe it's offshore, I don't know where it is, but and if you give people more money, that will really stimulate the economy and create more jobs. And I'm just quoting Reich here, of course. But I mean, that's really the big picture. And you think of the French Revolution. We don't want that here, do we? So how about sharing a little better, you know? I mean, do people really need gigantic mega mansions in the hills? You know, I don't know. It just seems silly. And, you know, it threatens the stability and the safety of our country to have so many impoverished people on the streets.
The International Monetary Fund considers the United States as putting themselves in economic jeopardy because of the level of economic and disparity that we have, and they have even said that we need to raise our minimum wage. And that's not a socialist group, right? That's actually maybe a group that is very much saying very much about a thriving capitalist economy. And they consider us putting ourselves in jeopardy with the situation we have. Yeah.
I may have missed this. You may have addressed it, but I just heard you say if we don't come to the meetings, then they'll only hear from those who object. And I think it behooves us to know what those objections are, so we'll be ready to answer. Do you have a few that you can describe? Maybe I missed Gail earlier, so she may have described it. Thank you.
Great question. Gail, turn it over.
Well, I think that when the question comes up about small businesses, which is always kind of a sticking point, studies have been done that compare when the minimum wage has been raised in New Jersey versus Pennsylvania, and they've discovered it did not lead to a decrease in jobs. In fact, workers have less turnover, their employers need to do less training for people. There's more loyalty to the business because the people have a living wage. So I think these are what the studies have shown. So there really are not a lot of, almost no studies that can prove some of these arguments. And the other thing I think it's important to remember, in Silicon Valley, we just need to go higher because people cannot afford to live around here, and they can't move, as Meghan said, an hour, 2 hours away and commute for a minimum wage job. I mean, they can't even pay the transportation costs. So if we need these workers in our community, it behooves us to have them live around here. And even in San Jose, the costs have gone up tremendously. So people in Palo Alto think, oh, they could live in San Jose. Well, that's not as easy an alternative for families as it used to be. So those are some of the arguments I think that come up. Who else would like to add to that?
I can add that, so we can see here that 2/3 of low-wage employers are large, right? So then we have 1/3 of firms with less than 100 employees, which even, 90 employees might not be what we would all consider a small business. So we can imagine the small chunk that is small business, and we can see here that nationally 3 out of 5 small businesses support, I believe it's going to $10 from $7.25. 3 out of 5 small business owners support it. 85% of small businesses already, so I'm giving you the argument against before I give you the argument. 85% already pay more than minimum wage. So we do have a slice of small businesses that are, and restaurants in particular, that are paying minimum wage. And that can be, I think, the most vocal opposition, both in terms of the restaurant association, as well as sort of the argument that's most made, we're going to destroy our restaurants. And San Jose, right, they went from $8 to $10, and overall restaurant business went up. So you're always going to be able to find studies on both sides. But the US Department of Labor did a meta-analysis of 64 studies, and they found that raising the minimum wage overall is a positive thing. So I think what you might encounter would be people saying, well, the research shows that we're going to lose jobs and all of this. But the majority of research does not indicate that that's the case. And in terms of restaurants, when we look at San Jose as a model, when they went up, 25% in one jump, if we think about it in terms of percentage, the restaurant industry has not has not tanked at all. In fact, business is up. And this is, I'm a psychologist, so I'll say one, the availability heuristic. When people picture the small restaurant owner struggling, it's like, A, that might not be true, and probably not true. But B, it's so not representative of the bigger picture and the issue, but it becomes that image in the head. So I think that part of how to counter it has to do with just the facts and reality of minimum wage work, and of, this is me just being anecdotal. I cannot imagine Castro Street not being able to weather a minimum wage. That is one thriving and fun street. And we have, right, 94, our wages here certainly can support people still going out to a restaurant, paying a quarter of a dollar more for their hamburger or veggie burger.
Again, I want to bring up about human rights. I think Americans tend to think that human rights is about civil and political rights. The right to free speech, freedom of religion, the right to vote, the right to a fair trial. Those are part of human rights. But people don't think that there's such a thing as economic rights. The right to food, the right to a place to live, the right to a reasonable wage. So I think it's a matter of charity or something. And so this is something America's just not aware of. And which is more important, the right to food, the right to eat, or the right to vote?
And the charity that happens is taxpayers subsidizing large wage workers, because the fact is their wages don't cover food and health care, and that we end up subsidizing it. Dave had something. And then
Hi. I studied the mind of the conservative mind through Professor George Lakoff, and they demonize the poor and they praise the rich, as you know, and that is the mindset you have to work with. And you have to show them, like they did in Utah, that it's cheaper to put the homeless in homes than it is to let them stay out. And time after time, when you put more money into the 99%ers, the economy grows. And when you take money away from 99% through budget cuts, you create recession. And that's why I say you have to work with.
yeah. There is a wealth of knowledge in this room. Thank you.
Yes, I was going to add that there have been some studies of cross-border minimum wage differentials, and they've shown that there is not a decrease in employment in the areas that have higher minimum wages, and there hasn't been a depressed economy in the area that has higher minimum wages. And these are very interesting studies because they deal with a similar population and people that can actually shop on either side of the border.
Yeah.
Was there something else? I guess that was all I wanted to add.
That is one of the arguments that will be brought up in opposition. And the truth is, businesses already have different regulations that they're following in different cities, right? They can raise the prices a little bit. We can handle it here. Yeah.
You've talked about legislative solutions. How about some of the other solutions? Collective bargaining, pressure. Walmart is the largest employer in the United States. Business licenses, and what other solutions are available, do you think?
Great. Gail, do you want to comment?
We've become aware of one idea being advanced by an economist in Berkeley called a windfall profits tax, which would be on, that's getting into the housing angle, on landlords and apartment association owners. So I think everyone should, as we all have different sources of information, I think our communities need to be looking at whatever is helpful. The other thing I wanted to add about restaurants, because that always comes up, is the new model, I think of it as a new model, is that you go in and you order at the counter and then you sit down. So you don't have someone coming to your table to serve you. So you may not think, oh, well, this is not one of those, white tablecloth restaurants. So those people behind the counter, they're all making minimum wage. So one thing that's been helpful to me, if this doesn't seem real to you or people you talk to, your neighbors, your family, whatever, is wherever you go, talk to the people and ask them, are there workers here who make the minimum wage? What do people start at? Like I talked to the guy at Trader Joe's. He said, oh, well, I'm not getting as many people lining up to work here because they can make more if they work in the cafeteria at Google. Well, some of the high-tech companies with a little pressure are starting to increase what they pay the contractors, because some of these big high-tech companies kind of try to morally separate themselves from this issue by saying, oh, well, that's not us. We have a contractor for the cafeteria. We have a contractor for the janitorial service. But in reality, they need to take responsibility for that. And I think some of them are now. Apple is starting to take, I think, the security guards, they're bringing them in-house. The other thing that happens is they may say, oh, well, for example, our security guards make $16 an hour. Well, then when you look into it, you find out, but no one gets more than 25 hours a week. So this is how they get around it. So you really need to kind of get into the weeds of this, I guess, as people say, and think about where we're putting our dollars, because as consumers, we have some power.
Hello. First of all, I applaud and support your efforts, so thank you. I think a minimum wage is a good baseline that should exist. On the other hand, it's a rather complex problem with many issues, and just looking at it from traditional basic, human drives and markets, when there is a large supply of labor, there's no pressure to increase wages, right? When there's a scarcity, there is, and wages go above minimum wage. Okay. Could you comment on any relationship, if there is, between particular types of employers and illegal aliens?
Like undocumented immigrants?
Illegal aliens.
Is that what that means? Okay. Gail, do you want to field first? Okay, so I think there were two parts of the question. So what was the first part? So there's undocumented immigrants and what the relationship is there. And we have a comment up here too.
Well, I'm just asking, what relationship, if any, do you see between market price wages and the huge supply of labor coming from, as you want to call it, undocumented or illegal aliens?
I think that's actually a great question. So to the first part about scarcity, right, when we look at economics, right, scarcity of labor prices, workers get more money, lots of workers, the wage goes down, absolutely. And I think that really is why, if the market isn't always going to say that we have a floor in terms of human rights, in terms of work, I think that's why the legislative piece is important, of saying here's the minimum wage in the country. So I think that's kind of how minimum wage can handle that. And then in terms of undocumented immigrants, I'm not an expert on this, but there's farm workers in the state that are largely undocumented immigrants that, I think one man recently died. They pick apples for how much money a day? Does anyone know about what recently happened with some of the farm workers rurally in California? They're hugely exploited, yeah.
And they're not covered by the wage restrictions.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment about and have your response to the fact that housing in this area is one of the things that can jump very quickly. As we all know, and I have a little experience with it as well, that your monthly charge for your apartment can jump in $100 to $200 a month, overnight practically.
or 500 if it's Avalon Apartments.
Or even more than that, as you probably are aware of. And that seems to me to be, if that's coupled to the minimum wage, people are losing their homes as fast as they're losing, as much as the wage will not cover it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you find in that area as to how many people are actually affected by this particular problem, but it's very huge in this area.
Anyone who's working on housing issues can have my email and I will show up for any pertinent meetings. Yeah, I don't know if the point was minimum wage isn't enough, but that's certainly, I think, one takeaway is it's a complex, the conditions for low-wage workers is a complex one and a hard one. And minimum wage isn't going to solve everything. It's just not, no question. And that said, we heard about the story of this woman, Cherry, who was able to finally get a filling. Can you imagine, after years of not getting her tooth fixed, that extra money a month made a difference. So I think that a number of comments that are coming up now are really addressing the fact that there's the problem with economic inequality and low-wage work, and housing is complex and huge, and that we do need to raise the minimum wage, but we need more than just that to really tackle the issue.
Well, you in essence preempted my comment, because I support raising the minimum wage and I support moving toward living incomes. It appears from past experiences that raising the minimum wage a little doesn't usually trigger substitutions by the employers. But if you try to move toward living incomes, it probably will. And so we will have to address those issues as well as just raising income. The substitutions would be like for undocumented workers, offshoring, reducing hours, automation, generally finding ways to cut labor costs. And so we'll have to have efforts in areas that corral those substitutions if you want to actually achieve living incomes.
Great. Go ahead, Gail.
I think that's right, but also we've kind of focused on using examples of people who are providing us direct services, and those people cannot be moved offshore. So we still need those people, and we need them to be able to live close enough that they can have a life and have their children in school.
Yeah. And unfortunately, $15 is not a living wage for most. So if we take the median wage for Santa Clara County, the median wage in Palo Alto being, not the half the median wage, I'm sorry, being like 22, I think once we get to 22 or 25, we would also have to have a little bit different conversations than 15. So I don't know if you agree.
I think a group that hasn't been mentioned yet is home health care aides, in-home supportive services that like from the county and the state, and people in nursing homes being cared for. I spent a few months in a nursing home, and you'd like to think that the people that are taking care of you are getting enough to live on, and but you've got to wonder. and so I think that's a huge group of people. And it's going to get larger as the population ages. And I think for those of us who are getting up there, that it's a serious consideration that we would want the kind of people that are going to come and take care of us to have a decent wage to do it. I mean, some of the things that they have to do are terrible. And, why should they want to do it for $7 an hour or $9 an hour?
Mm-hmm. Great. Gail, do you want to say anything? There's so much.
I really appreciate all of the input, and I think you're aware of so many other issues and resources, and for that reason, I do once more mention, please sign up on the social action table if you're interested in getting more information about the Raise the Wage Coalition, because sometimes it's covered in the press, and sometimes if there's other big issues going on, it kind of drops out. So I think we decided to choose this issue because it helps advance and help people a little bit. And that's maybe what we can do right now. And then there's some of the bigger issues we need to also support. But I think this is something concrete that can make a difference in people's lives. If they make a few $100s more a month, that can make the difference.
So the final, I guess the final call would be please sign up and be as involved as you want in the coalition. And if you get that email that's like the call, the meeting is happening in Palo Alto or Gilroy or San Jose, please come. Every person in that room matters. Local politics is where things, I think, can really change, where, you know, us showing up at that rally or that meeting really counts for a lot. So please come, and please bring a friend or 5 and pass it on. That really matters.
So I think we've got 2 or 3 minutes still before lunch is running a bit late, so we can take another question if we got it. I just wanted to point out your sign-up list is here, right, on this table. So right by me here, if you're wondering where it is. There's several sheets if you, the first sheets, run out of the first sheet. I had a question, actually. You've talked a lot. It's great news that there's a minimum wage increases planned in most of the local cities. But then you said, you know, New York is number 2. What was it? Number 3.
For housing, yeah.
Where, in terms of cost of living, I mean, beyond, you know if there are similar initiatives in other areas of the country where these are very high cost of living?
Say that one more time.
Well, there's obviously several initiatives going on here in the cities to increase.
Sorry, I didn't hear that word.
Yeah, is that same?
Now, LA 13 they've passed 13 an hour in LA. I think LA passed 13 hours. So I think, initiatives are happening all over the country. Chicago, I know they're all sort of at different stages. New York as well has an initiative, and I can't tell you off the top of my head what the number was, but it's really spreading, and this is timely, and if it's gonna happen, back to the name of the talk, if it's gonna happen anywhere, here is the place for it to happen.